This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hi, this is Daniel Greenfield on the Glazov gang with the Daniel Greenfield Moment. Tonight I would like to talk to you about the Caliphate Curve and why the Muslim Brotherhood is an even bigger threat than ISIS and why the Caliphate Curve is the key to understanding the threat of Islamic terrorism. What we must understand is this: forget moderate or extreme. What the media describes as moderate or extreme Islamic organizations are just different points on the Caliphate Curve. The Muslim Brotherhood isn't more moderate than ISIS just because it kills fewer people. Al-Qaeda isn't extreme because it crashes jets into buildings. Those are tactics that have the common aim of creating the caliphate. Every Islamic organization that seeks to bring back the caliphate is a point on the ominous caliphate curve. Islamic supremacist organizations like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the Muslim Brotherhood can all be graded as different points on the caliphate curve. Now, what is the caliphate curve? It's a measure of how fast Muslim groups seek to bring back the caliphate. The position of an Islamic organization on the caliphate curve is not based on some delusion about how moderate or how extreme the group is, but based on how quickly, how speedily it seeks to achieve the caliphate. What the media describes as extreme or moderate is really the speed at which an Islamic group is working to recreate the caliphate. The speed at which an Islamic group seeks to bring back the caliphate also determines its choice of tactics. The faster a group wants to bring back the caliphate, the more extreme its tactics have to become. It has to use more ruthless measures, while an organization that seeks to bring it back at a slower pace has the discretion to use more political measures. ISIS is at the extreme end of the scale, not because it tortures, kills, and rapes, but because it implemented the caliphate immediately. What we consider the atrocities, the tortures, the murders, and the rapes are just the caliphate. This is what a caliphate looks like. The atrocities for which ISIS has become known are typical of a functioning caliphate. The execution of Muslims who do not submit to the caliph, the ethnic cleansing and sexual slavery of non-Muslims are not aberrations. They are normal behavior within a caliphate. ISIS is so horrible because it's the end game of the caliphate right now. It's as if the left had skipped the whole business of trying to elect socialists to public office and cut right to the firing squads and the gulags. But that's always the end game. It's the speed at which the end game arrives that makes it shocking. That's the difference between blowing the lobster right away and taking some time to boil it. The end game is the same for every organization on the caliphate curve, for every Islamist group, because their end game is the caliphate. What ISIS is doing is what Islamic caliphates have always done. The last caliphate, the Ottoman Empire, was selling non-Muslim girls as sex slaves after the invention of the telephone. A New York Times report from 1886 documented the sale of girls as young as 12, one of them with light hazel eyes, black eyebrows, and long hair. Another report from the London Post described Turks sending their blacks to market, and I'm quoting here, in order to make room for a newly purchased white girl. This behavior is not a temporary aberration, but dates all the way back to Muhammad's men raping and enslaving non-Muslim women and young girls as a reward for their fighting to spread Islam. The ISIS behaviors that we find so shocking were widely practiced in even the most civilized parts of the Muslim world around the time that the Statue of Liberty was being dedicated in New York City. To Muslims, the end of slavery is one of the humiliations that they had to endure because of the loss of the caliphate. Europeans forced an end to the slave trade. The British made the Turks give up their slave trade. The British anti-slavery patrols worked in Egypt to stop slavery there. The United States made the Saudis give up their slaves in the 1960s. Yes, in the 1960s. Unofficially, however, they still exist. When the Muslim Brotherhood took over Egypt, the Islamist constitution dropped the ban on slavery. The Muslim Brotherhood is on the moderate side of the caliphate curve, not because it does want to bring back the caliphate, it does, or because it doesn't want to subjugate non-Muslims, it most certainly does, but because it wants to do so gradually, over an extended period of time using modern political methods. Whether you take the long road along the caliphate curve or the short one, it still ends up in the same place. It still ends up in a caliphate. Everyone on the caliphate curve agrees that the world, including the United States, must be ruled by Muslims under Islamic law, and that freedom and equal rights for all must come to an end. ISIS is just doing now what the Muslim Brotherhood will take 100 years to accomplish. We are not at war with ISIS. We are not at war with the Muslim Brotherhood. We are at war with everyone on the caliphate curve, not because we choose to be, but because like Hitler's 1,000-year Reich or communism's vision of one world under the red flag. The caliphate is a plan for imposing a totalitarian system on us to deprive us of our rights, our freedoms, and our future. The Nazis and the communists had a vision for the world. So did the Islamic supremacists who advocate the restoration of the caliphate. All these groups occasionally play the victim of our foreign policy. They pretended that we made them do it, that we forced them to do it, that we oppressed them with our foreign policy. But the fact of the matter is they were not responding to us. They were not our victims. Instead, they had a vision of society, a positive vision from their point of view. This ideal vision of a society of Nazism, communism, and Islam just happened to be living nightmares for the rest of us. It's important to remember that no one on the caliphate curve is moderate. If you want to bring back the caliphate, if you want to rule the world under Islamic law, if you want to repress non-Muslims, you are not a moderate. Some on the caliphate curve just happen to be more patient. They put up billboards, they create hashtags, they influence politicians, and they try to ban any criticism of their ideology as Islamophobia. But that's just caliphatism with a human face, and that makes them a much more dangerous enemy. ISIS is in some ways our least dangerous enemy. We haven't defeated ISIS not because we can't defeat ISIS because it's too tough, but because we haven't even tried. Obama's fought a war in which 75% of strikes on ISIS are blocked, and leaflets are dropped 45 minutes before a strike on oil tankers, warning ISIS to run away. If we were to fight ISIS by the same rules as our wars in the last century, the Islamic State would have been crushed long ago. And then the caliphate like ISIS isn't that hard to beat. The global networks of Al-Qaeda employing more conventional terror tactics are a trickier force because they are embedded within the stream of Muslim migration. And the Muslim Brotherhood is the trickiest of them all because it is so deeply embedded within Muslim populations in the West that it represents and controls those populations. What ISIS accomplishes by brute force, the Muslim Brotherhood does by setting up networks of front groups. Both ISIS and the Brotherhood control large Muslim populations. ISIS controls populations in failed states like Syria and Iraq. The Muslim Brotherhood, however, exercises control over populations in Europe and America, in Canada, in Australia. It exercises control over populations in the heartlands of the West. We could bomb Raqqa, but can we bomb Dearborn, Jersey City, or Irvine? This is where this caliphate curve truly reaches its most terrifying potential. ISIS is a short-term plan to bring back the caliphate. It's a long-shot gamble. Its immediacy is what makes it terrifying and vulnerable. We haven't been desensitized or anesthetized to its sudden explosion of brutality the way that we have to Saudi Arabia's beheadings or Hamas dragging its victims behind motorcycles, or rape marriages in Afghanistan, or Iran raping girls before executing them so that they don't die as virgins. When evil drags on over time, we become desensitized to it. We stop noticing it. We start thinking of it as yesterday's news. If ISIS sticks around, the world will become desensitized to its horror, the way that it has to beheadings, stonings, and ethnic cleansings taking place across the entire Muslim world. That is why the Muslim Brotherhood is a bigger threat than ISIS. ISIS wants us to be afraid of it. It wants to terrify us. It wants to show us what it's capable of. And that has woken up millions of people who would otherwise be sleeping. The Muslim Brotherhood wants us to be asleep. It wants us to be unaware of it and desensitized to it. It wants to sneak up on us. Its gradual Islamization of our societies is meant to be crawl forward month by month and year by year. That's what makes it so very dangerous. The Muslim Brotherhood isn't moderate and ISIS isn't extreme. ISIS is just impatient. Its position on the caliphate curve means that it wants the caliphate and it wants the caliphate right now. The Brotherhood, however, is patient. It has a long-term plan. It doesn't want us to understand what it's doing until it's too late. Its position on the caliphate curve determines its tactics. We can destroy ISIS tomorrow, but we will still be in an extended war with 100 other groups who all have a vision for restoring the caliphate. We are not at war with an organization, but with the idea that Muslims are superior to non-Muslims and are endowed by Allah with the right to rule over them, to rob them, to rape them, and enslave them. ISIS is the most naked expression of this idea, but it's an idea that everyone on the caliphate curve accepts. Until we defeat this racist idea, new Islamic groups will constantly keep arising, animated by this vision of subjugating non-Muslims and ruling the world under Islamic law. This is a position that is spread across the caliphate curve, and we are at war with the entire caliphate curve. It's important that we remember that. Thank you for listening. This has been a segment of the Glazov gang called the Daniel Greenfield Moment. If you enjoyed the segment, please subscribe to the Glazov gang and help support the Glazov gang by visiting the website or subscribing to the show.